of different parts of receipt merging today. I'm going to be looking at the actual receipt merging of your standard receipts on a day-by-day basis, concentrating mainly on just the problems that people seem to run into. After me, I'll pass over to Gary, and Gary will take you through processing of your end-of-year receipts. It's now June, and so for those of you in Australia, it's coming up to tax time, so this is a very timely bit of instruction for you on how to generate your end-of-year receipts. To begin with, I'd like to just do a little bit of an overview of processing of receipts and how the information effectively ends up in the final receipt that's given. I won't go into too much detail about the campaign setup. There have been other webinars in the past on how to set up an actual campaign. But just basically, when you do set up a campaign, one of the things that you can do is set up a default letter, or in fact a number of different letters. In our case here, you can see we've got a default letter code of 10. Now that could be general, it could be gen-on or something of that nature, but in this case it's just number 10. When you actually enter donations into the system and you pick a particular campaign, in this case test 1, by default it will come up with the default letter that you've specified in your campaign setup. Of course you can change that if necessary, but normally you would just use the same one. When you come to actually go in through the process of generating the receipts as part of the end-of-day procedure, what actually happens is you're going to generate a file called names.txt. Now that's going to take information from the actual NewDon record, the one that you've entered as a donation, so things like the campaign name, the letter, any details, the amounts. It's also going to take information from the donor record as well, name and address details, and it's going to write those into this names.txt file. This is the file that will actually be used when you do the word merge. So when it finishes creating names.txt, normally it would open automatically whatever your standard receipt document is. So what we're looking at here essentially is all of the actions that occur when you're in Microsoft Word. And most of what I'll be doing today will concentrate on the actual Word side of doing the merging. So what it will do, it will take each of the records from this names.txt file with all of the details into your master document. Now that master document would typically be called receipt.doc, but it might be thank.ww8 or something of your own naming. It doesn't have to be called receipt.doc or docx. It will have merge fields in there, which will be substituted with the details from your names.txt file. At the bottom, there will be receipt details as well, such as how much it was, what it was for, that type of stuff. But in the middle, there's this special field, it's an include text field, and based on information that is supplied again from names.txt, in this case letter 10, it will then go out and bring in letter 10 as a Word document into your master document, and it will produce that page for that particular document, for that donor. So you've got the name, address, and salutation, whatever the letter is, and that will vary from campaign to campaign with the receipt details at the bottom. So just to show the whole thing in context, different changes in different places will have an effect. So if you don't set various things up correctly, then you may be introducing problems with your merge. So I'm just going to get out of that now, and I'm going to go into our my little system here. I'll go into donation processing, and I've actually set up, I think there's about 7 receipts in there, or should I say 7 donations, and most of those have got some form of problems. These are problems that quite commonly come up. We get a large number of requests for help with problems with mergers. So a lot of these ones that I go through will be ones that you go through yourself or come across from time to time. So I'm going to create my receipt merge data file here. I've already done it, so I'm just restarting with the same receipt number. I'm going to go through. You can see here that my document that I'm using as my master merge document is receipt.docx. once you put it there, it'll remember that for next time. So normally whatever you've got there, that will be your master document. I go to the second page. I've got a list of my fields that I can output. There's a whole lot of those there. There's a lot of extra ones added at the bottom. You can add extra ones by clicking on File and then on Field, but I'm not going to go through that at this stage. So I go Continue. It will go away, create a names.txt file with 7 records in it, and it's automatically opened up my Word document. Now, normally speaking, if it comes up and says it should be opened as read-only, you would normally go yes, but because I know that I've got some changes I'm going to need to make to fix some things, I'm going to go no to that. I also have this question here. It's saying it will run the following SQL, and it's going to pick up the data from my names.txt file. So I'm just going to say yes to that. So what I'm seeing here is my master document. At the top there, you can see the name of it is receipt.docx because that's what I asked Donman to open. And at the top, I've got the date, address, details, salutation fields, and if I were to go down the bottom, I've got some details for the actual receipt. In the middle, it looks like I've got some text there, but when I click on it, you'll notice that it sort of half grays out. That is actually not text that's really part of this document. That's actually where that include text field sits. Now, I can have a look at that easily by simply pressing Alt F9. And you can see there I've got this include text field, and it's going to my D drive, to DM07 test, which in your case would normally say Donman. I've called mine webinar DM work, but yours would typically be just DM work. And in my case, I'm actually putting all of my embedded letters in a subdirectory under DM work called letters. So when I create a new campaign or something like that, then I need to put the corresponding letters into the letters directory under DM work. Now, some people will do that, others won't. They will just have those letters in DM work. That's purely up to you. After that, it's got a merge field called letter no. Now, so that is one of those fields that's generated by the merge process in Donman, and it will typically take the default letter code and add the word letter in front of it. So in the example that I was using on my diagram, the letter code was 10, but the corresponding document was letter 10, no spaces between those. You'll also notice here that after the name of the document, I've got .docx. In some places, you might have just .doc. In others, it will be .docx. Whichever you have, that's the type of document that you need to create in order for it to be embedded within there. So either all of your documents should be .doc or .docx. Okay, I'm just going to press Alt F9 again, and that will take me back the way that it normally should be when you first come into that. If I do the merge now, we're going to get a number of errors. In fact, there's actually only going to be one error to start with. So if I do finish and merge, edit individual, I'll go OK. It's come up and it said Word could not finish merging these documents or inserting this database. So I go OK. I've got my first letter there, but I can't scroll any further. There is only one document that it's been able to produce. Now, the problem with this is typically that there is something in, well, if I've got one record, the problem's going to be in the record after that. So in record 2, there will be some sort of problem, and typically it will be that there will be a double quote somewhere in the name or address lines. We can quickly have a look at the names.txt file just so you can see what's in there. So names.txt. So I've just opened it up. So you can see here that the names and addresses and things like that have been enclosed by double quote marks around the data. Now, I know, because I've purposely done it, that I've put, instead of O Brian Street, I've got O double quote. So when it reads that, it thinks that that double quote is the end of that field, but there's no comma because there's all this other stuff in front of it. Now, you don't normally have to do that. I could actually change it and save it here if I wanted to. I won't do that because the best way to fix that is simply to go into Donman. I'm going to go back to the donor record, and I know it was donor 71 in this case, There it is with O'Brien. So I'm simply going to change that back to apostrophe, the way that it should be. I'll save that record. And now I'll get out of there. I'll go into donation troubleshoot, into processing. Now I'll need to close Word before I can do that because Word currently has names.txt open. So I'll close this document as well, and I'll just run that step again. So I don't need to save anything there. So I'm just going to rerun this exactly as I ran it before. Yes to that. So again, you can see that it's generated 7 records. It's bringing up Word again. I'm going to go no again, and yes to that one. Okay, so now if I try and do my merge, I will get a whole lot of errors, but at least it will try and do all 7 records. So I've got an error in record 3, record 4, 5. I've got a fields nested too deeply, which is another problem that you might have. Another one, 6 and 7. So I really haven't done that well. Here's my first letter, and that looks generally okay. There is a little bit of a problem with it. Okay, here's my second one there. Now this is funny because you can see that the first line is bolded. But in fact, if I were to look at that letter major .docx, that would not be bolded. So that's one of the problems that you might find. You might find that there's random bolding or italics or underlining or some very strange things that can occur there. If we look down a bit further, not a valid file name. So it can't find the letter that it's supposed to embed there. Same thing with this one and this one again. And I've got one there. That's brought some stuff in, but this is the one that's actually causing that nested too deeply error. And then the last one, there's nothing there. So I'm just going to close this down, and we'll go through some of these problems one by one. Now, one of the problems is, I'm back in my receipt document. If I Alt F9 at this point, the random bolding, italics, and underlining is caused by this field here, where it's got this \* merge format. If I delete that, and it's best to do that one character at a time so I don't delete too much, when I do my merge, that random bolding that I got at the beginning of that second or third document will not occur. So I can just Alt F9 and I'll save my document so I don't have to do that every time I do it. Obviously, if I had done it as read-only, I wouldn't have been able to save that. Okay, now there were some other problems. For instance, if in mailings I can actually look at the details that I've got that is being produced in that names.txt file. And if I go far enough across there, you can see here are the field names or the letters that it's supposed to be producing. So letter general and letter major seem to come out, but letter tax didn't come out. That was one of the ones that was a bit of a problem. So I'll just OK that for the moment. If I go to File, Open, and I look in my letters directory under here, so it's in letters. I've called it letter tax, whereas what Donman was requesting was letter _tax. So all I need to do is change that to be _.docx, and it should now be able to pick that one up. So I don't even need to open that one. I've fixed that problem. Now, there was another problem as well, and that was trying to look at letter tests, I think it was. So let me just go File, Open again. And, it must have been letter test 2, but you'll notice that it's a .doc. Now, in my include text, it was actually asking for .docx. So what I need to do is I need to open that up, save it as a .doc file, .docx, I apologize. Oops, sorry, file, save as. So at the moment it's saving it as a doc file or a Word 97 to 2003 document. So I just need to change that to Word document and I'll save that. Okay, so let me close that. What I'll do, just to save confusion, I'll go to the Open Dialog box and I'll actually get rid of the test2.doc Otherwise, it looks like I've got two documents the same. So I'll do that. And in fact, what I might do, I'll open this one up again, and where it says wrong file type used, I'll just delete that because I've now fixed that. So if I save that and close it, I have now fixed that problem. Now there are a few others, but let's see how we go so far. So if I do finish and merge, edit individual, I'll go OK. Okay, so I've still got a problem with record 5. I've got the nested too deeply in the 6th one, and I've got 7 gone. So we need to have a look at what's going on with records 5, 6, and 7. So again, under mail, I'm sorry, I need to close down my merged document. So I'm going to have a look at my recipients again, and to see, oops, too far. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is letter test 1. Then we've got letter test 3, and then we've got this one at the end. Now, that one at the end is basically because there's no campaign, there's no letter set up in the campaign, and it obviously allowed it to go through because you probably have a blank letter code. So you effectively haven't picked any particular letter, so it just comes out as letter. So that's actually a problem with your campaign setup. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So we need to have a look at letter test 1 and letter test 3. All right, so I'll go again to open. I'm looking for letter test 1. Well, hang on, it's not there. Now, in my case, I know that it's actually in my DM work directory. So essentially, I've put it into the wrong spot. So I can should be able to just cut that, hopefully. Go into my letter subdirectory and paste it there. And there it is. So hopefully it was letter test and not letter underscore test 1. I probably should check that. Okay, now the other one that it said was letter test 3. So if I open up letter test 3, immediately you can see that it's actually blanked out all of that, oh, not blanked out, it's sort of grayed out all of that text. This is because this is, in fact, not text from that document, but it is this include text field. So what it's going to do is it's going to go out to letter test3.docx. As soon as it opens that and includes that, it says, oh, I've got to go out and I've got to embed letter test 3 again. And so it basically tries embedding itself and embedding itself and embedding itself till it can't go any further. It then produces that error message, nested too deeply. Now, you could either delete all of that and retype it, or another way to do it is to actually, once it's highlighted all, and if I cut that with Control X, if I do a paste special, I should be able to do one which is just the text only. So now if I do Alt F9, there's no change to it. So having done that, if I save that now, and I'll close that, now the only error that should really occur from a can't find the file point of view will be the last one. Okay, so I've got all the way down to letter 7, and now again, I'll go right to the bottom, and it says not a valid file name. So we've fixed up all of those possible errors. In the case of the that last one there, you could do one of two things. You could reopen the batch and edit the donation and give it a valid receipt, a valid letter code. Another alternative would be that you could actually create a letter document in your wherever it would normally be and just call it letter.docx, and that would then allow you to do the merge, but that's perhaps not the best thing to do. Or the alternative things could be, if I just close this down for the moment, I'll say don't save, and under Edit Recipient List, if I click on the names down the bottom here and click on Edit, I can actually go through. So I'll just go to Record 7, go to the end, and if I scroll that down, you can see how it's got letter. Well, if I use something, maybe I'll call it, make it underscore general, that's kind of fooling it into thinking that Donman wants it to use letter general, and then I OK that. When I do my merge now, everything seems to have worked. There's no error messages that have popped up there. And so if I were to go to the bottom it's now included letter general as I've requested with the receipt at the bottom. So that's all well and good if there was only the one. If there were several donations, like 10 or 20, you may choose to create that letter.docx, do your merge, and then once you've done the merge, delete letter.docx so it doesn't cause problems further down the line. Now, this is, if I've gone back to the top of this page, yes, this is the first one, that's fine. If I now look at the second one, you go, well, hang on, we've got some text there. This, as you can see, is from the embedded letter, but it's come up with the wrong font. This here is Times New Roman, and you can see that up here, whereas the rest of my document is actually Arial. If I go back to my first document again, you can see that one, that looks fine, that's Arial as well. Now, the problem typically for this is a problem to do with your styles, because there are styles that are defined in your embedded document, letter major docx. There are also styles that are defined in your master document, in my case receipt.docx. And therefore, what will happen is when the letter gets embedded, it will inherit the style definition according to what's in the master document, the style of the same name. Then if there's any overrides to that, like if you've bolded certain sections or changed the font, then they will be applied after the initial one. Now, in this case, you can see that this is normal text. I'm going to close this down and go back to my master document. And if I go home and if I look at the definition for normal, I just right-click on that and select Modify. You can see that the definition is Times New Roman 12. So what that means is that if there's a document that I'm embedded within this and the style used in the embedded letter is normal, then it's going to by default come out as Times New Roman, which is not what we want. So all I need to do is click on this. I'm going to tell it that I want Arial. I'll make it 10 or whatever it needs to be. Click on New Documents based on the template and go OK. Now if I do my merge, hopefully the first one was okay, and now the second one's okay, and all these other ones should now be using the appropriate text. So sometimes when you're in your when you're in your embedded letter general or whatever it is, it may look fine there, but when it gets embedded into your receipts, when you do the merge, it won't be correct. If that's the case, then you need to look at the styles. My suggestion would be, if possible, make everything normal in both the embedded letter and in the other, and if necessary, change the style definitions to suit your corporate standard. So if it's meant to be Arial 10 or Calibri 11 or whatever, if you make the style normal, in each case exactly what you want, and if you define the letter or all the text in that letter to be that style, then you are very unlikely to run into any problems. Okay, there are other issues that can occur. Now I'll get out of this. Now in here, this is where if I press Alt F9 again, when I initially did that, we had the \* merge format there that was causing the random bolding. If I do any form of formatting of this text here, and I might, maybe try and indent it or something like that. If I do the Alt F9, it hasn't done it in this case, but if you do any sort of formatting change, maybe I'll change the style or something like that. What can possibly happen is that you'll inherit that \* merge format, as you can see there. So if you do any formatting of that, just press Alt F9 and make sure that there is no \* merge format, or if there is, then you probably need to get rid of it. Now I'd better undo a lot of that because it's probably ruined a few things there. Okay, now there are other problems that may occur. Sometimes when you do your merge, this receipt here, it's probably not in the case mine, but you may in fact end up at the bottom of a second page that is essentially blank. That would be caused by your embedded letter here being too long. So you may need to get rid of spaces at the beginning of it, spaces at the end, or perhaps removing a paragraph or two if it's too long. Otherwise, if you're happy to let it go to the second page, that is fine. sometimes, depending on how you set up your embedded letter, you may find that when you do a merge, you will get that SQL command prompt again. So when I first started up this document, it said, this will run the following SQL command, and I've got to go yes to that. If you set up one of your embedded letters to be a master merge document, perhaps just so you can get some a merge field into it from the names.txt file, every time you do a merge with that particular letter, you'll have to say yes. So if we're using, say, lettergeneral.docx, and that's a master merge document, and that gets used 2 or 3 times, you'll have to say yes 2 or 3 times. To overcome that, all you need to do is open up the appropriate embedded letter, go to Mailings, go to Start Mail Merge, and select Normal Word Document, and then save it. And that way, it then is no longer a mail merge document, and you won't get that prompt. If ever you need to include a field in your embedded letter, or the easiest way to do that is go to your receipt document, whatever that's called, find a blank spot, insert the appropriate merge field. Let's say I want to include, comments 1 or something like that, and just click on that and insert, close that, and I'll just copy that. Or I'll cut that actually, and I can then paste that into my document. So if I'm going to put that into letter test 3, I can just paste that as a merge field into that document, and obviously save that. Okay. That's pretty much it as far as my section of it. There may well be other problems that you have when you're doing it. Sometimes they're a lot more complex, but typically most of the problems that you have when you're doing your receipting is actually word issues as opposed to Donman issues. So if you run into any of those ones that I've mentioned, you hopefully will now know how to fix it, or at least which webinar to come to. I'll now pass over to Gary, who will now show you how to do the end of year receipts.
Hello everybody, thanks Murray. Hopefully people have been able to take that in. There is quite a bit of information in the receipting, but as Murray has mentioned, the better we do that setup and the more consistent we are, the errors become very little. So from the daily receipt, and specifically at this time of year, we've got people that do monthly deductions for credit cards or from bank accounts, etc. And we're getting to that time of year, we're saying we need to now generate the receipt for all of those donations during the year. Because what I don't want to do is, send somebody a receipt 12 times a year when I can send them one which encapsulates all of the donations for the period. So what we do is, if I've been through, and I'll just go into donors and look up one of my donors. If I then look at their history, I can see here that I've got a campaign called Auto Deduct, and from July 2014 up till June this year, if I look across, you'll see none of these donations at this point have been receipted. So they're all part of an auto deduction campaign or a pledge campaign, and the pledges have been set up as auto deductions. If I go back to the donors record, so in the pledge down here, you can see up the top it's saying it's an auto deduct is just the name of the campaign in this case. It could just be pledges or regular gifts or whatever you actually want to call it. But down the bottom here is where I've said that yes, it's an auto deduction, and this is where I've got the details of credit cards, or if I'm using Gateway, I'll have a token in where the card number would normally go. And each month I can then run the auto deductions. So when I get to this time of year, saying, well, now we want to do the receipts for those people. So a little bit different than the standard receipt. So if I need to do the end of year receipt program, I need to go through the main menu, into Modify History Archive, where normally I'll have the password, and I think just about everyone who touches Donman knows what that password is by now. If not, just ask us and we'll tell you. So when you go into there, on the right-hand side of the menu, you'll see end-of-year receipts. So this is the program that's been specifically written to allow us to do that receipting and create one receipt number for the whole, 12 or, whatever number of donations the person's given you in the period that we're about to stipulate. So when I run the program, it comes up. So the very first question on this screen says, do you want to do a test run first? So if perchance I haven't got my document set up, but I just want to create a file and not change anything in Donman, then I'd say, yes, I do want to do a test run. What the test run will do, and I'll explain as I sort of go through, is create the data file, issue the receipt number, but it won't actually change the donation records on the donor's record. Okay? So when I look at the donations later, they'll still be 0 receipt number. If I've got different letters that I want to send or anything else, then I might say, yes, I just want to select by campaign. Because sometimes you'll have general donations that have gone into anonymous or something like that you might say, look, I don't want to receive any of those donations. That's sort of irrelevant. So in this case, if I say yes, and I've chosen my auto-deduction campaign. And so if I enter through, so now it says issue receipts for the period from. So this is where you'd put in the date range to suit your financial year. So in this case, we're just going to use the standard 1st of July to 30th of June. Yeah, but if you're running a different financial year, say yours was September or May or whatever it was, just put in the dates to suit the date range you want to do. The next question down where it says, do you want to select one donor number? This is something that you may do sometimes, especially if you've got somebody who has been a regular donor, but they're maybe moving overseas or something like that and need to sort out all their tax and other things before they go. So then I can say, well, in the date range from 1st of July to whatever day I need to run it, I can then say, I just want to do this for this particular donor. For the normal end of year, you say, no, I'm just going to do absolutely everybody. Okay, so I don't need to do it for a selection file because the criteria that I've entered up the top here should cover what I want to cover. Okay, if I've got the barcoding, RAT or QAS, and I'd say, yes, I want to output the barcodes. Use the second address file would normally be no, and unless you're using the alternate citations for anything, again, just no to that. So down the bottom here, the system will then say, just like your normal receipt file is called names.txt, so in this case, it may be called, and the standard name is just thankend.txt, so it's basically thank you for the end of year receipts. Okay, the fields that come out are all here already, and down the bottom it's got, do you want to load word and merge? Okay, so because I've already got that file, pardon me, so yes, I want to overwrite that. So just like when we do the daily receipts, the question on the screen is load word and merge yes, and in this case, I'm looking in this folder here where I've got my Donman set up, and this is the name of my document. Okay, so if I say yes to begin, again, I've got all of the fields that are coming out, and normally I wouldn't need to change those, so I can just click enter, press enter or click on continue. And the system will then go through and find the donors and the donations for the period for the auto-deduct campaign that haven't yet been received. Okay, so that's now opening up my Word document. Okay, so just cancel that. So when I've done that, the system would have printed out a log of, how many records it's picked up for the end of year receipts. Okay, so normally that will print automatically. In my case, I've just got my default printer as a PDF because I don't need to print reams and reams of paper of stuff that I'm not going to use. Okay, so just like the normal receipt document, be it a doc or docx, saying it should be open as read only. So in this case, I can say yes because I know that my particular document's already been set up. So a little bit similar to your standard receipt. I'll just shrink this so I can actually get on the page. Okay. The difference being that in the donation or the receipt file that we use for the end of year receipts, there isn't a single date as such. So in here, I might have to go in and say, look, I want to insert and choose a field here. So look, I want to put in the date. Okay, so on the right-hand side here, I've got date and time, and I can choose how I want the date to come out. If I choose that, choose update automatically. Yeah, so that's now just using more of a Windows field than anything else. The top part of this is very similar to the normal receipting. So you can see we've got address lines 1 to 6, the citation field. Where the letter is, this is where the differences start to come in, the bigger differences. There's one of two ways I can do this. I can just have text written in here that's going to be, thanks for your gift for, this period. We appreciate your, regular contributions, etc., and have static text there that everyone's going to get. And down the bottom, the receipt itself can look similar, except there is different fields. So in the date field, the one that we use is called last date, which is the date of the last transaction for the donor. If I go back to my mailings tab, click on preview results, so I can see that was the date that was related to the last auto deduction run, so basically yesterday. Okay, then I've got the donor's name, but here instead of just having the text that I'd normally have to say it was a donation or it was something like that, I'd put a field which is called Don Count, which is the number of gifts the person's given you in the date range. And from there I can then have the text that just says donation or donations. Okay? The last field, instead of just having an amount or amount 2, amount 3, as the standard receipt does, has Don Tot, which is the total of the donations in the date range that we specify. There are fields that you can put in the letter. Have a look. Okay, so you can see there's one called Donate List, which is a list of the donations, so basically the dates and the amounts. You can put that in the letter, but then your letter's going to become, pretty ugly as far as having all of those details, because it's not necessarily a statement that you're sending the person, it's a receipt. And for all purposes, as long as down the bottom here, the total here and the number of donations is correct, and it says that it's a donation, you've got the date and everything else as per your normal receipt, then you should be able to merge those as normal. Yeah. So as I was saying, in this case, if I go through and do my merge, edit individual, or records, and this is something that sometimes people do. So I've got my letter come up, I've got all my details, so they've given 12 donations. Again, the next person again is given 12 donations, and if I can get my screen to shrink back down again. Okay, so I'm getting a different total for each person depending on how much they've given me during the year. So sometimes people get overexcited and go, oh, my merge worked, thank God for that. So they go and print this out. Yeah. At this point, bad thing to do, because back in Donman, if I go back to look at my donor, and look at their history. Yeah, so the donations at this point, because I did a test run, haven't yet been given the receipt number. So if per chance I print those out, and especially if I send them out, and then I start doing normal receipts, somebody else is going to get that receipt number. So that obviously can cause a big problem for me. Yeah. So once I know that my test has actually worked, so everything's gone through, it merges fine, I can then save my thank end document, say, okay, my end of year receipt is complete. I can now go through and do a live run, knowing that the merge should work and there should be no problems. Yeah, so I can close all that down. Okay, so probably a good idea after you do the end of year receipt run, actually go and check one or a few of the donors and just make sure that the receipt number has been allocated. If not, it means that somewhere in the process we've actually done the test run, we haven't done the live run. So if I go back to my Modify History Archive menu, end of year receipts, so now that I know my document's set up, all the fields are in there, etc., I'm going to say, no, I don't want to do a test run. Again, I can select by the same campaign, same date range, and just go through. So yes, overwrite the file. Okay, so you'll see at this point it all looks exactly the same, which is why people sort of get caught sometimes by doing the test run. So it opens my document. So yes, open it as read only, and then I could go through to the merge as I would do normally. But in this case, everything looks the same, but if I go back to Donman now, and back to my donor record, look at their history again. So I can now see all of these transactions have all got the one receipt number. Okay, so that's telling me now that, so that's the big difference between doing the test run and basically the live run, is that one won't upset the donation, so I can get my document set up if I need to. Certainly if I say no to a test run, it's now going to allocate receipt numbers to those donations, so that when I do normal processing now, whatever the last donation that I issued in this particular case, if we go and have a look, if I get my mouse to behave here. Okay, so as I can see, so 3922. Okay, so it's following the normal sequence of donation numbers that Donman would have been using. So when I do my next lot of manual processing, it'll be using 3927 because that's just the next number in my sequence, as it would be, for a normal merge. But there's not a great deal to the end of year receipt, especially it doesn't have the complexity of the daily receipt, because it doesn't have the include text line in where we need to, make sure there's different letters, etc. But as I was saying, there are two ways you can do the text in the letter itself. If I've got the letter here, and you see, just like Murray was showing you before, in this case, I've clicked there and I can see it's all grey, which is indicating to me that this is a field. It's not actual text. If you press Alt F9, or you've got this button up here on your quick launch bar, which you can see when I highlight says the same thing, view field codes. So in this case, I basically put in the same sort of field, so it's got include text, but I've actually put the letter name in there. Okay? So I can do it that way, so that all my letters really are in one place, or I can just have the physical text as part of the letter itself. So you can do it one way or the other. If perchance you're, doing different programs and the text that you're sending for the end of year receipts was different, then this might be a better option to consider, or just basically copy and paste the text and do the, when you do the end of year receipts, say, yes, I want to choose a different campaign, because you might have a sponsorship campaign or, something else like that you want to send an end of year receipts for, and the text that you have for your general donations that are auto deductions may not be appropriate for, different programs. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do that to get the text of the letter in. So as I said, if I didn't have that in, I could just cut that all out and just type my text in that I wanted to have now. Okay, so hopefully that will give people a bit of a help with what Murray's looked at as far as your daily receipts, and certainly some of the issues that we come across quite often with receipting and stuff like that. But certainly for doing the end of year receipts, it's not really that in depth, but there are a couple of things to be careful of, and certainly doing that test run, because we don't want to have somebody who's merged a test and actually printed it out, etc. And then later on we find that the receipt numbers haven't been issued to those donors, because that's a bit of a problem to try and go and fix up. Now, so I'll hand back to Marla now, and we'll go through any questions and things that people have, and see how we go for answers.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, a few questions already, so we've got to go back to Murray, I think, so I might just hand back controls to Murray.
Okay.
And just a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions, log them, type them in the box provided in the control panel, and I will read them out. So just going back to a little section, Murray, that you did on about halfway through the webcast. Renee just had a question that you might have gone through it a little quickly for her, and she just wanted clarification on what you did to the embedded too deeply fix. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
Too deeply.
Yeah, now,
Okay, thanks, Murray. And I think we'll switch back to Gary now because the rest of the questions, I think, for him. So from Sally, she just wanted to know how many campaigns can be done at the same time for the end-of-year receipting.
You can do all of them unless you stipulate.
But I think probably you can do up to 20 specific ones.
Yeah.
Okay, and from Renee, what about people who donate both monthly and one-off and want a yearly receipt to reflect both?
Then all you do is not receipt them during the year, but it does get a bit messy then. Because if the text that you write for the end-of-year receipt is around a particular program, you know, to say thanks for supporting us for, you know, this sort of work, and you've got general donations that are coming during the year, then the figure is going to be a little bit inflated. But for the receipt itself, it's not going to matter. It will just say that there's 14 gifts totaling, you know, X dollars at the end of it.
Okay. From Roz, do I need to have the pledges as an auto-deduct for Donman to collate the same receipt number for all 12 donations?
No. And any donation that you put through during the year that you say no to receipting for, you can utilise this for. The auto-deduct is just the most normal way that sort of comes about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from Renee again, what about monthly donors that have accidentally received a receipt number on a monthly donation and shouldn't have? What's the easiest way to fix that?
Panic. No, just kidding. Well, it does cause a big problem because basically we'd have to remove the receipt number from the transaction that has, because at the end of the year, then their receipt's going to show 11 donations instead of the 12, especially if they're a monthly person. And then, you know, it starts a whole cascade of processes going off where we then have to try and figure out why this person's not showing 12 when we know they're a monthly person. Because the end-of-year receipt program will only pick up a transaction if the receipt number is currently 0.
And if they actually do have a receipt number, can you be sure that, in fact, they weren't issued a receipt at that point in time? because if they have actually been issued with that receipt, you don't want to include it on the end of year receipt. So you need to be totally sure that even though they have a receipt number, they were never sent it.
Right. Renee's just saying back on that was she says they receipt them for one-offs, but when the donor wants a total reflected on their end of year, can you do that?
If you're doing that, it wouldn't be so much an end of year receipt. There is another program on there on the modified history called Donation Summary Statement, which will give them dates and receipt numbers and amounts and stuff that you can utilise. Because if you've got people that are signing up for a monthly one, it's always a problem if you do receipt the first one, because you're always going to have that gap in your receipt at the end of the year. What you can do is use the pledge records to find all the people who started a pledge this week for that campaign and send them an acknowledgement letter, but not send them a receipt.
Okay, a question from Carol. Bear with me, this is a long one. The master document retains the last merge letter, and Carol said she's been told to never save the master document. Therefore, I have to make out any layout changes to the master document before I merge, and then I can't save them. Is that right?
Well, if you know that you need to make some sort of layout change, maybe move the dates up or something like that, then when you open up the master document, you would say, like I did, I don't want it as read-only, and then you can make your changes and save them. But for normal circumstances, if you're not making any changes, then you don't want to be able to save it, because if you accidentally muck something up without knowing it and you end up saving it, then it's mucked up from then on. So you would normally only open up your master document as not read-only when you know that you need to make a change to the master document itself. Do you think that answers the question?
Hopefully. That looks to be the last of the questions.
Also remembering that the text you see on the screen is the last successful merge, but it's still the result of the field. The text itself isn't physically there.
That's right. So even if the text of the letter doesn't look like it's the right one, it doesn't matter. It's only when you do the merge that you need to be concerned if the wrong text comes out.
Carol said yes, it has clarified it for us, so thank you for that.
Excellent.
All right, so that seems to be the end of the questions, so we might wrap it up there. Thank you, Gary and Murray, for today's webcast, as always, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Our next webcast is scheduled for Tuesday, the 21st of July at 2 o'clock. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time. So we'll have further details in your sent out to you shortly on that. And, of course, just a reminder, you'll find recordings of all of our webcasts on the Donman website under What's New, and also posted in our monthly newsletter. So have a look in there for that. So if you do have any further questions, please feel free to contact us on info_donman@advsol.com or give us a call. So that concludes our webcast for today. Thank you again all for joining us, and goodbye for now.
Bye, everybody.